Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our community-wide call on behalf of Yeshiva University on the topic of confronting the coronavirus in our community. My name is Rabbi Glatt. I have the great privilege of serving as the David Mitzner Dean at Yeshiva University, and it is my pleasure to introduce our president of YU, Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman, to share introductory thoughts.
Thank you, Rabbi Glasser. We are thankful to him for organizing this very important evening, this very important call. I've spoken and we've sent out messages to our community throughout the course of this week to update you on what is happening at Yeshiva University, how we're addressing each of the multitude of issues that have come up due to the coronavirus. The medical direction that we've been guided by, especially with the help of the New York City Department of Health, and who's been enormously helpful. And it's very important to us to communicate to you every step of the way, so our community remains informed. A lot of material is on our website, and we'll continue to send out letters and update you. Tonight is something else. Tonight is about learning together and understanding, not just what we're doing, practically at Yeshiva University, but how our community addresses this situation and this challenge. We have, this evening, we have great rabbinic and medical, educational, psychological leadership of Yeshiva University and of our community, and they will lead us in this conversation for the rest of this evening. I just wanted to open with an introductory thought to just frame the time period of what we're in and our consciousness as we are in the midst of this right now. There's a short story immediately after Kriyas Yamsuf that is read through, but I think is a story of very powerful and impactful significance. It's true in general and certainly true for today. Am Yisrael, right after they left the Yamsuf, 3 days later, they didn't find water. They complained to Moshe, and Hashem says, Hashem shows Moshe a stick, an eight, and Moshe throws it into the water's sweetened, and they're able to drink. And Hashem says to them, Kol ha'machla asher samti b'Mitzrayim lo asim alecha, ki ani Hashem rofecha. All of the machla, the illness, the plagues that I put before Mitzrayim, I will not put on you, because I am Hashem who healed you. It's very interesting because the story resonates and it sounds so similar, because it's a story of a stick being thrown into the water and the water changing. And it reminds us, of course, of Mitzrayim and of the plagues when Moshe hit the water and it turned into blood.
Why you was making a thing right now for next hours.
And this is the story. This is the story.
Sorry, Rabbi Berman. I apologize. This is Yaakov. There is someone who is on the line for some reason who is unmuted. If you could mute your phone, we would appreciate it.
Maybe put the whole thing in the hot. I'll make it hot. Take a few bites of it. No, just so that I have something to fight.
Rabbi Berman, just give us one moment, okay? I apologize.
Sure.
Give us.
Sure.
Rabbi Berman, are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay, I believe we've addressed the problem.
Okay.
Please continue. I apologize.
Sure. Thank you, Rabbi Glasser. So, what we've the idea of that Am Yisrael experiencing Hashem in Mitzrayim is really Hashem who turns these miracles into plagues and things that afflict is the experience of Am Yisrael of Hashem, which is captured in Az Yashir when they talk of Hashem and they say Hashem Yishmo Chama Hashem Shemo. What is the God that they know? They know a God of war, and they know a God that creates miracles to punish. And this story right after Yetzias Mitzrayim is the first story where they take a stick, Moshe takes a stick and he hits it in the water, but it's a water that becomes sweet, and it's an act that heals. And what Hashem introduces is that it's not just Hashem Yishmo Chama Hashem Shemo, it's Ki Ani Hashem Rafecha, that I am the Hashem that heals you. And that's what I'm here to do, that I am Hashem that heals you. And in this context, the context that we're in, Ki Ani Hashem Rafecha certainly is crucial for us to think about and to lean on in our tefillot and in and how we go about our day. It's turning to each other with support, it's learning, and it's davening, and that's the frame. Now, all of this is on top of our vigilance medically and with our health and taking every precaution that we need to take. Every precaution that we need to take. It's the medical, it's our health, and it's in addition our primary Jewish values that will carry us through this time. And central to that is, of course, keeping in focus Ki Ani Hashem Rafecha. So with that, on that note, I'll turn it to Rabbi Glasser to please continue with our program, halachically, medically, educationally, and psychologically.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Berman. And building on that theme of Rofecha, it is a great privilege for us to welcome Rabbi Dr. Glatt, who is the chair of the Department of Medicine of Mount Sinai, South Nassau, the chief of infectious diseases and the hospital epidemiologist. He's also a Rav in the Five Towns community and someone very close to our yeshiva on many levels. We would like to ask Rabbi Dr. Glatt to share with us some of the medical perspective on this challenge. And before he begins, once again, we appear to have a little bit of feedback. So if there is anyone listening with something in the background, or even if not, if you could please mute your phone, we would appreciate it very much. Rabbi Dr. Glatt, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
So it's a tremendous honor for me to be here tonight with all the other esteemed Rabbanim and distinguished panelists. It's a personal cover for me to be involved with this program as a graduate of Yeshiva, and having two children graduates in Musmachim of the Yeshiva. I have a tremendous hakaras hatov to the Yeshiva, and Be'ezus Hashem, this difficulty that the Yeshiva is going through right now is part of Klal Yisrael going through this difficulty, and Be'ezus Hashem will come to a very, hopefully, successful conclusion. My 10 minutes that I'll be speaking about tonight will be dealing with the medical issues. I will leave the halachic issues to be discussed by others, Rabbi Lebowitz Shlita, and I have 10 minutes to give a background, which is very difficult to do in 10 minutes. I'll assume people have some familiarity that this novel coronavirus is a mutated virus. It's different than the typical coronaviruses, which are the typical cold viruses. There are three such mutated viruses that we know about. There's SARS 2002, and it went away, Baruch Hashem. There's another entity called MERS, which has not gone away, which is a very serious infection, but Baruch Hashem is only in certain parts of the world and is still, Baruch Hashem, quite rare. And now we have this new novel coronavirus now called COVID-19, which was identified in Wuhan, China in December of 2019. Give you a quick epidemiological background of what's going on in the world. Right now, there are officially about 100,000 cases. My suspicion is that, in fact, there are many more such cases because many of the cases were not identified initially, and many of the mildly symptomatic as well as asymptomatic cases have not been identified. About a few hours ago, the laboratory called LabCorp came out with a test which will now be able to hopefully allow us to better identify this virus in people. This is a major breakthrough, and it literally just occurred a few hours ago, and now physicians will be able to test, hopefully a lot more easily, for this entity COVID-19, and this is a major breakthrough. Until now, in New York State, there was only one laboratory that could test for this, and until earlier this week that they could test for it. Until then, only a handful of laboratories in the country could test. So this is a major important information. What it will do is allow doctors to care for these patients much better, but it will also undoubtedly make the number of cases dramatically go up, because doctors will now be able to identify cases that were very mild, and every doctor will be able to order this test. I don't know the capacity of this test right now, but this will be definitely making an impact on the numbers that we'll see. Right now in the United States, there are only about 160 cases in total. 80 of them were brought into the United States. These were citizens that were identified outside the United States on a cruise or on travel. And there are 80 cases that transmitted within the United States. Unfortunately, there have been a number of deaths in the state of Washington because many of those cases were associated with older patients who had underlying medical serious problems and were in a nursing home, and that's where all the deaths in the United States have occurred only in that institution. There have been no deaths elsewhere in the United States, and we're seeing cases in a number of states. New York, as of the middle of the day, I don't know if there are additional cases. There are a number of cases that have been pending. There are 14 cases right now in New York, most of them associated with the New Rochelle father, and the associated cases associated with that individual, and that obviously included a student at Yeshiva, and that included a student in Yeshiva high school, and now various members of the New Rochelle community. So what is the risk of getting COVID-19? So there are a number of different studies that are looking at the incubation period. We roughly assume that if somebody was exposed to a real case of COVID-19, it would take them between 2 and 14 days to develop illness if they are going to develop illness. And that's the understanding why we have the 14-day self-quarantine period for anybody that has been exposed to a bona fide case of COVID-19. Those people may not be ever contagious. They probably are not going to be highly contagious if they remain asymptomatic and, in fact, do get a very, very superficial infection. We don't really have a lot of data on that at this time. The people that do get more significant symptoms are contagious. How contagious they are? Well, there was a study published earlier this week that suggested that it's actually not that contagious. There are some other studies that corroborate that. There are other studies and clinical situations that suggest that that's not true for everybody. Ergo, the New Rochelle case is an example where obviously that patient was very contagious, and that all of his family members and even people that only had a relatively short period of time with him did acquire this. The good news is that this disease, COVID-19, doesn't seem to be a particularly serious illness in children, Baruch Hashem. In all of the cases that have been reported, over 100,000 cases in the world, there's, Baruch Hashem, not been a single child under the age of 10 that has died from this illness at the present time. Let's hope, B'ezras Hashem, that continues. Unfortunately, at the other extreme of life, if you're looking at patients above the age of 80 who have a much more serious underlying diseases, and especially in China where there's tremendous pollution problem, and many of the patients in the studies in China probably had underlying significant respiratory illness. So the morbidity in that group, the mortality in that group is much higher. Both morbidity and mortality are going to be higher in the older debilitated patients. And that we unfortunately saw in the state of Washington as well in the patients in that nursing home. What should we be doing? The single most important thing, and I've discussed it with my Rebbeim, Rav Shechter Shlita, Rav Willich Shlita, and I will leave all the paskening to Rabbi Lebowitz to discuss this further, but it's a kol koreh that we have to go out to our communities. The people that are sick should not be coming to shul. If you have a respiratory illness, you should not be coming to shul. And people need to know that they shouldn't be going even for Parsha Zachar. They shouldn't be going for Mikra Megillah. They can be yotzei them in other ways. I'll leave that to Rabbi Lebowitz to discuss as well. But people should not be going out into the public, not to shul, not to work, not to the supermarket, not to any event. The only place they should be going is if they need to, is to go to a doctor. If they don't need to go to the doctor, there is no need to go to a doctor in that situation. We don't have any treatment for COVID-19 at this point. There are a number of investigational agents that are being looked at, and we don't have a vaccine for this at this point in time as well. I would point out that we do have a vaccine for influenza, and it's a very highly successful vaccine, and influenza and COVID-19 are very similar in terms of being epidemics. 30,000 people in the United States have died from COVID-19 at this point in time this year, during the same period of time as the coronavirus, unfortunately. That's a tremendous toll on life, and it's somewhat preventable. An excellent, albeit not perfect, vaccine is available. It is not too late to get this vaccine. This will cut down on people in shul having respiratory illnesses, and influenza can be fatal to the same elderly, debilitated population as is COVID-19. Finally, shuls and moseds, institutions, should be making sure that they have appropriate hand washing availability. You should put in various alcohol sanitizers, hand hygiene products. So people that say davening in shul, they're not going to take off the towels and tefillin to go to the bathroom, but they will go and wash their hands with a handheld dispenser, which can be used on Shabbos. And it shouldn't be an automatic one. It should be one that you have to push or activate without using electricity, preferably. And this way, people can wash their hands appropriately. People should try to limit their contact. Certainly if you're a sick person, as I said, you shouldn't go to shul. Those people shouldn't be shaking hands with anybody else. If individuals choose not to shake hands, that's perfectly acceptable. At this point in time, with the number of cases that we have, I haven't made a blanket recommendation that we shouldn't shake anybody's hands, but it's certainly something to consider to limit physical hand-to-hand contact. People can give a fist bump, an elbow bump, or just say good Shabbos without having to necessarily come into contact with the hands of another person. People, when they do get their hands potentially contaminated, they should wash them carefully for at least 20 seconds. People should try as much as possible to make sure that they they stop themselves from touching their mouth, their nose, their eyes, especially if the hands are potentially contaminated. The routine going about in life at this point, we don't recommend that people make drastic changes in what they're doing. Baruch Hashem, at this point in time, I wouldn't tell people not to go to shul by any means. I wouldn't tell people not to go to shiurim. I wouldn't tell people that they can't go to a kiddush. However, one needs to be aware that the information that I'm providing right now is based upon the most current medical information as of today, and that may obviously change tomorrow, and there may be different recommendations, and a person needs to listen to what the public health experts are constantly learning about this illness and how we can do everything possible to prevent it. A lot of it is seichel, good common sense, keeping your hands clean, not touching your face. If you're sick, staying away from everybody else, self-quarantining no matter what illness you have in a private room in your house if you have that, and limiting your contact with other people when you're sick is the best eitzah. That's my 10 minutes. I thank you very much for giving me the honor of presenting, and everybody should be, as Hashem, have a safe evening.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Dr. Glatt. At this point, we'd like to ask Rabbi Aryeh Lebowitz, who is the director of our Semikhah program here at RIETS, to share with us in his classic 10-minute halacha format some of the halachic issues that are related to this situation. Rabbi Lebowitz.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Glasser, and thank you, Rabbi Dr. Berman, as well, for arranging for this call. It is no surprise that the community of Shomrei Torah Mitzvos immediately thinks of Dvar Hashem in the form of halacha when considering the impact of something this big, of something this all-encompassing. Ashreinu matov chalkeinu. Everything that happens, good and bad, is an opportunity for avodas Hashem, which is always our primary occupation. Now, the number of shilas that Rabbanim have been fielding over the past week or so ranges in diversity and variety, some to very specific circumstances and some that are more generally applicable. But one day, I'm sure there will be a kuntrus written on all of the interesting shilas that came out of this, and Amir Hashem, it will be lahalacha v'lo l'maisa, it will only be lahagdil Torah lahadir. For example, people asking about chametz that's in a quarantine zone, does the guy really have access? These kinds of lumdisha questions, but that's not going to be our focus for tonight. Our focus for tonight are for the issues that are most pressing right now. It should be clear the overriding principle of everything is unishmartem ma'od l'nafshosechem, that we must protect public health. We have to make sure that we're not putting anybody's life in danger. If there's a mitzvah da'oraisa of lo samar al dam re'echa, that we're not allowed to stand idly by as others are likely to be hurt or worse, then it's obvious that we cannot cause others, especially the most vulnerable, to become ill. The Gemara Moed Katan says that a person who discards his fingernails in a public place is considered a rasha because he's showing disregard for the health of other people, all the more so someone who's contagious and goes out and allows other people to catch his illness is doing something that is quite terrible. Morenu Rav Willig pointed out that while we may know people, we may even know doctors who are skeptical about the need for all of these precautions, we can only go by what the government agencies tell us. We have the right to be more machmir on pikuach nefesh than the government, but we do not have the right to be more makil, to be more lenient with pikuach nefesh. Our general attitude is going to be, when approaching the halachic issues, to accept opinions that maybe normally, under normal circumstances, we wouldn't accept, based on the fact that this would constitute a shas hadchak. And that's in line with the principle of Kedaihu Rabbi Shimon Nismach Alav B'Shas Hadchak, that sometimes even opinions that are rejected by halacha, in trying circumstances, we follow those opinions. Morenu Rav Shechter Shlita points out that that's one of the ways, actually, that the principle of Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chayim applies la halacha. That normally we assume that both opinions in the machlokas are true in Torah, but we're only going to paskin like one of them. Well, now this is a circumstance where even the one that we don't paskin like becomes something that's relevant la halacha. Now, generally speaking, there are three categories of people. There are two classic categories. One is a person who is quarantined or ill, and therefore there's nothing to discuss. Such a person has no business going out in public and must follow all the rules that the government tells us that they should follow. On the other extreme, you have people who have no symptoms, no exposure that we know of, and they, we're told, should go about life as normal, but with taking extra precautions, as Rabbi Dr. Glatt Shlita has just mentioned. There is a third category, though, that has emerged, and those are people who either suffer from anxiety, and certainly the media frenzy has not helped them, and they may have no reason to be nervous from a logical perspective, but they might be very nervous. And there are also people who are of advanced age or otherwise immunocompromised that are just more, they have no symptoms, but they're more nervous about going out publicly. I spoke to Rav Shechter earlier today, and he said, ideally such people should come to shul, sit by themselves and leave early. If they really can't, then they shouldn't. If it's an older person whose doctor says, look, you run a greater risk of catching illness, then he should put himself in that category of the quarantined or the ill who should stay home. So what do you do then how does one deal with Purim, how does one deal with Shabbos, and how does one deal in general with certain Ben Adam L'Chaveru issues? So it goes without saying again that one who's quarantined cannot go out. Question is, so how does he do everything that a Jew is expected to do? So on Tainus Esther, certainly anyone who has any symptoms should not be fasting on Tainus Esther. Anybody who feels slight weakness or who's immunocompromised and feels a sense of weakness should not be fasting on Tainus Esther. When one is dehydrated, it affects the immune system to a certain degree. When it comes to Parsha Zachar, there is a mitzvah d'oraisa to read Parsha Zachar. The Gemara Megillah Daf Yudches tells us that Zechira has to be bepeh. It can't just be something that we have in mind. We have to verbalize it. Trumas Hadeshen writes that it should be done b'tzibur, from a real Sefer Torah. So obviously a person in quarantine can't go to shul. So how are they supposed to be yotzei? So there are three options. Option number one is if your quarantine period ends before Purim, which many people it does, the Magen Avram writes in Siman Tafresh Pei Hey that you could be yotzei the mitzvah of Zechiras Amalek with the Kriyas HaTorah on Purim morning of Vayavo Amalek. Now, to be noted, the Mishnah Brura, the Aruch HaShulchan, the Maral Diskin, and many others disagree, and they say that you're not yotzei with Vayavo Amalek because there's no tzivui. It says emche, not timche. But nevertheless, that is an opinion in poskim that one might rely on in these circumstances to be yotzei then at that point. Certainly, all agree that one could be yotzei in the summertime when we read Parshas Kisetzei, and hopefully all of this will be a distant memory, and we could be yotzei the mitzvah at that time. Maram Shik quotes a chumrah of his Rebbe, the Chassam Sofer, that in a leap year it's necessary to be yotzei with Parshas Kisetzei anyway, because there are more than 12 months that will have passed from one Parsha Zachar to the other, but everyone agrees certainly that qualifies as a Kriyas HaTorah b'tzibur. And then a third option, although it's not accepted lahalacha really, but maybe one can be yotzei just by reading from a chumash. That too is an option that Rav Shechter suggested for those who are unable to leave the house. When it comes to the minhag of machzis hashekel on Erev Purim, so the Ramah in Siman Tafrei Sadi Dalid writes that there is a minhag that we use 3 half-dollar coins. Some are makvid that they should have 9.6 grams of silver among them, and people should put cash in the plate, and everybody lifts up those same 3 half-dollar coins and gives it while saying Zeich L'Machzis HaShekel, and this would seem to be problematic for our situation. Everybody's going to be touching the same coins. That's something that would certainly not be recommended. So Moreno of Willig Shlita Paskin that it's worthwhile passing up this minhag for the sake of protecting public safety. Rav Shechter Shlita, Moreno Rav Shechter Shlita Paskin that you can still fulfill this minhag. Who says you have to use the 3 half-dollar coins? Put in $2 in the plate, and that's it. You don't have to. It's not actual machzah shekel. It's a zecher to machzah shekel. You don't have to be so makbid about using 3 half-dollar coins. Maybe a shul, if they're nervous about it, would want to consider having a box of disposable gloves next to the machzah shekel plate and a garbage can right next to it, so people won't be touching it with their hands. Every shul could decide what they want to do about that. When it comes to Megillah reading, so again, certainly someone who's in quarantine cannot leave the house. Someone who's immunocompromised may not want to leave the house by orders of their doctor, nor can you make your own minyan, because that doesn't really help if you're going to be gathering together kihilos in your own home. But if one has so you have 3 options. If one has a cloth, that's the best option. If you have an actual Megillah, read it. If you don't know the Megillah, that's okay. There's a wonderful website called YU Torah, and you can go and listen to Rabbi Jeremy Weider laning the Megillah, and you can just read it along with him. Don't just listen to him because it's a recording, but read it along with him in your Megillah, and then you'll get all the words right because he reads it very clearly and slowly, and that is the best way to be Yotzei Mikra Megillah. Rabbi Willig suggested that if it's deemed safe, then you can have somebody stand outside of your door or your window from more than 6 feet away and read it to you. Normally you can't be mitzvah 2 people who are in different rooms to make a minyan, but Shomei HaKohen can work from one point in the room to the next. If neither of those options are available, Moreno Rav Shechter Shlita was willing to be lenient to join a shul's reading through a live feed, through a FaceTime, a Zoom conference, something of that nature. This is not ideal. It's not something that should ever be used in anything but the most trying circumstances, and Rav Shechter was very clear about that. But given these circumstances where a person is technically exempt from the mitzvah because he can't leave his house, this is something that maybe one can rely on b'shas hadchak. When it comes to mishloach manos and matanos levyonim, certainly these mitzvahs can be fulfilled through a shliach. The Mishnah Berurah even quotes a shita that of the Binyan Tzion that it's ideal to be yotzei mishloach manos through a shliach. Okay, whether that Binyan Tzion exists is a discussion for a different time, but everyone holds that you certainly can be yotzei through a shliach. When it comes to Shabbos issues, so as Rabbi Dr. Glatt Shlita has mentioned, we have to be washing our hands frequently and well, and using soap in general is an issue on Shabbos. Memareach is a tolda of memachek, and involves smoothing a pliable substance over an area. But Rav Moshe Feinstein already in the tshuva was makel on using liquid soap on Shabbos, that it's not a violation of memareach. He recommends as a chumrah to further liquefy the soap, make it more liquidy and less gel-like. It's a chumrah, and if one wants to do that, I guess they can, but certainly best not to, probably best not to take on extra chumras when you're dealing with something of this nature. Rav Shechter pointed out that Purell is certainly liquidy enough that it's not a problem to use on Shabbos. If one were to have a more of a gel-like substance because there was no Purell left and there's no soap and water for some reason, something that's more of a gel-like substance generally would be an issue on Shabbos. But under these circumstances, Rav Willig was makel based on Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and based on Rav Vad Yosef in Yabia Omer Chelik Dalit or Chaim Siman Chav Zayin Talamid that if something is going to be absorbed into the surface that you're rubbing it on, then it becomes it's not a problem of Memareach according to that opinion, and we can be makel in that opinion if you don't have a better option. Ideally, we should have a better option. We should have liquid soap and we should have Purell, and that should be readily available to all of us. As far as kissing mitzvah objects, kissing mitzvahs is a beautiful minhag that's brought in many different contexts. Kissing items of Kedusha, Sefer Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzah, even mitzvahs, even kissing the land of Israel. But it's a minhag, and it should be avoided in light of this scare. We certainly don't want to pass along saliva via the mantle of a Sefer Torah. In fact, Rav Henkin in Edus L'Yisrael, Siman Samach Gimel, is generally against kissing a Torah, as it shows. He thinks it shows too much comfortability with the Sefer Torah. He thinks it's a lack of respect for the Sefer Torah. Rav Victor Miller, Zichrono Livracha, thought that generally one should not kiss the Sefer Torah because of germs. He was nervous about germs. He said you should go close to the Sefer Torah and make a kissing sound. So that shows your affection. But don't put your mouth on it. That's disgusting, he said. That's going to pass along too many germs. And I'm sure many people have seen that Rav David Lau recently paskined to avoid kissing mezuzos. The Ramah in Yeredeus in Reish Pehei does record a practice to place a hand on a mezuzah when leaving or entering a room, and the Birkei Yosef quotes a minhag Arizal to kiss it, similar to the minhag to kiss tzitzis. But in these circumstances, certainly we don't have to follow that minhag. And in Shuvah Suksavim of the Chazon Ish, in Semikhah Dalet Osiyud Gimel, he writes that the Chazon Ish would look at the mezuzah on his way in and out, which the Rambam writes is really what it's supposed to be about. You're supposed to be reminded of the mezuzah, reminded of the presence of Hashem and how Hashem protects us. And certainly at a time like this, we need to remind ourselves about who is ultimately Shomer over Klal Yisrael, who ultimately protects Klal Yisrael. But it could be done with a gaze, with a look. It does not have to be done with a touch. And finally, when it comes to issues ben adam lechavero, it's important to always remember to daven. It's the only thing that we can really do that will help. Meaning, of course, we do all of our ishtadlus, but we know that ultimately what will really help is tefillah. Tefillah be'ez tzara is a mitzvah d'oraisa according to everybody, and this would seem to qualify as an eis tzara. We should daven. We should also check in very frequently with friends who are in quarantine, obviously not in person, but by texting them, by calling them. They are terribly bored. It is not easy to be stuck in your house for 2 weeks straight. Rabbi David Foreman, as a good example of how to act, offered free access to Aleph Beta for anyone who's quarantined. YU Torah is free all the time, so that's a good idea. Rabbi Yanki Horowitz offered to say Kaddish for anybody who's in quarantine missing saying Kaddish. These are wonderful ideas. You have a friend who's in quarantine, offer to pick up groceries and drop it on their doorstep. Things of that nature are very, very important to show chizuk and show support. When Klal Yisrael comes together, we should be zocha that Hashem should listen to our tefillos in this eis tzara and make this all a thing of the past as we continue to enjoy good health.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Lebowitz, for that incredibly clear and comprehensive presentation. We appreciate it so much. Our next speaker, as we move from the medical and the halachic elements of this to the more emotional, psychological challenges that we have in addressing this situation. So our next speaker is Dr. Rona Novick. Dr. Novick is the Dean of our Azrieli Graduate School of Jewish Education and Administration. And Dr. Novick is going to address how we should speak with our children with regards to the coronavirus. Dr. Novick.
Thank you, Rabbi Glatter and Berman, for making the arrangements for us to be able to share our thoughts this evening. The challenge for parents in this situation is that we see
Dr. Novick? Dr. Novick?
Yes.
Can I ask you to please speak up? It's a little hard to hear you. Thank you so much.
Yes. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I hope that's better. Okay. The challenge for us as parents in this situation is that we see our job as parents as protecting our children. We want to keep them safe, and we want to be able to give them guarantees that we will keep them safe. And in the current situation, we cannot guarantee. However, it is our job to be the grown-up, to be the voice of calm, and to provide reassurance. And I'll speak about that specifically in a moment. But in terms of remaining calm and portraying calm and a reassuring stance, we have to realize that how we act and whether we are showing signs of panic or distress will directly impact how distressed our children are. They are watching us and taking their cues from us. We need to talk to them about what we know and share facts, and again, more about that in a moment, but we also need to listen and to hear what their concerns are. Their concerns, depending on their age, may be very different from ours. They may be focused on, will I be able to have that play date? Will that event that I was hoping for to go to, will it be canceled? And if we do not listen to what their question is, we may answer the wrong thing. We can give them a lot of information about virus and transmission, and that's not what they were asking at all. They just want to know, is my friend's birthday party still on? In terms of providing reassurance, this is going to sound as if it's an oxymoron, because on the one hand, I'm going to tell you to provide reassurance, and on the other hand, I'm going to tell you to be honest and accurate. But we don't have to be brutally honest and accurate. Rabbi Dr. Glatt gave us wonderful statistics tonight to put things in perspective, but we do not need to go home to our 4-year-old or even our 10-year-old or our 14-year-old and say, do you know how many deaths there were and you know how many cases there are? That kind of facts and that focus on numbers and statistics may not be very helpful. But we can be accurate in saying and reassuring in saying that many very smart people and all adults, teachers, rabbis, medical professionals, government offices are all working to keep people healthy. And they are all sharing as much information as they can and teaching us the things that we can do. If your child asks directly for reassurance, will I get sick? We can't, again, offer something that we can't deliver on. But we don't have to say, well, I don't know. Who knows what will happen tomorrow? We can say, as Jews, we put our faith in Hashem, as observant, Torah-observant Jews, but we also put our faith in all the medical professionals who are telling us how to stay safe. And mom and dad, Abba, Ima, are doing all these things to keep our family safe. That's how we provide reassurance, even though at the same time we're being honest and accurate. Our children, at times like this, whether they are little ones or teenagers, may need and want more time with us. They may need a little bit more attention and TLC. So to the extent that it is possible, we should make ourselves more available, whether it's for conversation or whether it's just for being there with them, allowing them to share their fears or just showing them that we are there for them. We can also ensure our children's safety and our family's safety and teach them a skill that is a life skill and will give them a sense of mastery if we focus on good hygiene practices, teach them to wash their hands, teach them about keeping their hands away from their face, not having their finger find its way into their nose or into their mouth if they're little ones, or maybe not so little, but helping them learn good hygiene practices, putting them in charge of singing the song while you wash your hands, whether it's the ABC song or Happy Birthday, to ensure that you wash your hands for a full 20 seconds, teaching them how to be sure that they scrub carefully between their fingers and their fingertips, etc. And there are wonderful videos available to teach children proper hygiene and hand washing. It is very helpful in times of crisis and challenge for children to have as normal a routine as possible. Now, this is particularly challenging for families that are dealing with quarantine and their lives are somewhat turned upside down, or non-quarantined families who find that their school has been closed or other activities have been canceled. But to the extent possible that we can have structure and routine in children's lives, we help them. We should monitor our children's TV and social media habits. There is an enormous amount of information and misinformation, and the news is structured in such a way as to get our heart pumping and to make us think that everything is important and a crisis, and a disaster waiting to happen. We may need to pull the plug on some of that exposure for ourselves and for our children to keep them calm. It is tempting in times like this for children to look for a cause, to look for something or someone to blame. It's important to help our children understand that germs happen. They're no one's fault. No particular group deserves the blame for the coronavirus outbreak. We are all working diligently to keep everyone safe, that this is just something that happens. It is difficult to understand why some people get sick and other people don't. It is easier to explain to older children risk factors like elderly people are more vulnerable and people who are sick already. Young children think that older means someone who's 2 years older than them and may not understand some of the concepts that we use to explain. The last point I want to make before turning over to my colleague, Dr. Pelcovitz, is that I started by saying we, as parents, need to be the grown-up. We need to stay calm and provide reassurance. But how can we stay calm when we're watching the TV, when we're hearing the news bulletins, when we are perhaps hearing from our employer or our school setting that we should quarantine or stay out of large gatherings, etc.? I'm reminded, and Norm Blumenthal, Dr. Blumenthal from OHEL and the Trauma Center used this in a talk he gave earlier this week to parents. I'm reminded that when you're on the airplane, they always say if there's an emergency and the oxygen masks come down from the console, put your mask on first and then help others. Probably one of the most important things we can do as parents is be sure that we're caring for ourselves, that we're finding ways to find islands of calm and moments of peaceful reassurance so that we can be the reassuring presence in our children's lives that they so need at these difficult times. Wishing everyone a good and a healthy Shabbos and a Purim Sameach.
Thank you so much, Dr. Novick. Our final speaker for this evening is Dr. David Pelcovitz, the Gwendolyn and Joseph Straus Chair in Psychology and Jewish Education in the Azrieli Graduate School of Jewish Education and Administration. Of course, Dr. Pelcovitz is known throughout the community as a source of tremendous guidance in areas of mental health, and he's going to address us on the emotional impact of the coronavirus crisis. Dr. Pelcovitz.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. I've learned so much from every one of the speakers, and thank you for arranging such a valuable program. I'm going to focus more on general psychological kinds of guidelines. The first one is what I find to be particularly important to talk about, which is in terms of coping, to remind ourselves that one size doesn't fit all. Number of times in Shas, there's a machlokas between Ravami and Ravasi on the pasuk in Mishlei, Daga B'lev Ish Yashchena, that if you have a worry in your heart, and the disagreement is, should you distract yourself? Chad Amar Yashchena Midato, you try for Hesach Hadas, Chad Amar Yasichena Lacherim. The other perspective is you talk it out. But I've never been able to find any parish that says that any parish that says that one is better than the other. So we need to keep that in mind. You might be a husband who prefers to distract himself. Let's say you're quarantined and you're with that kind of chronic stress for a couple of weeks. And let's say the wife is a yasichena lacherim, somebody who's helped by talking. So the bottom line there is that you need to, the bottom line is that we need to figure out how to help them respect each other's right to have a different coping style. And if we keep that in mind, and by the way, and it's not going to always be that a distractor is always going to want to distract himself or herself. There are going to be times that we're helped by talking, times that we're helped by music, times that we're helped by learning, times that we're helped by doing chesed for others. And we just have to look at our toolbox of coping mechanisms and see what works best. The next related point has to do with the 1 out of 6 members of the population who are wired in a way that they're anxious. The calls that I've been getting since this started and that I've been hearing about from colleagues is the people who are wired in a way that they're anxious, that they're nervous. That's just a matter of temperament. And those individuals are going to have a harder time here, and they're going to need more support. We're going to need to cut such people more slack. We need to try to help them by reassuring them and give them the space to be able to talk things out. And, people with that kind of anxious style may be a little bit trying, especially if they're one of our children or if they're a close family member or a close friend. But we just have to remember that it's at times like this that people with anxious temperaments have the most need for reassurance, the most need for a patient listening ear. The Hebrew word ozen is tied to the word maznayim, a scale. There's something very balancing about validating that person's anxiety and hearing them out and understanding them. So that's a second point I just wanted to echo Dr. Novick's thoughts about the importance of monitoring TV watching. That's just as true for adults. I find that people who are very heavily glued to their TV sets, understandably at this time, especially since it involves our university and our community, and we're talking about people who we all know very well, many of us. But we have to know how to take care of ourselves. We have to know that heavy TV watching is at a certain point counterproductive. In many, many research studies done, especially after 9/11 or other kinds of major disasters, it was clearly found with adults as well that you do much better for yourself if you try to limit that kind of constant exposure, which leads to talking briefly about self-care, as Dr. Novick was talking about. And here, the component of self-care I wanted to focus on is just the need to concentrate on what's in your control, to the extent that we could discipline ourselves to focus more on what is it when you have no control over a situation. We always have control over the meaning. To concentrate on what gives you meaning, purpose, or fulfillment in a situation like that could be very helpful. To regularly take small breaks from the stress of the situation. If you're not quarantined, to be able to go out and just go for a walk in the park, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, has been found to be a greater stress reducer than one might imagine. And also to look in your head, to attempt to control self-defeating statements and replace them with more helpful thoughts. To remember the Baal Shem Tov's well-known statement, B'makam shmachshavto shel adam sham hu nimtza ha'ish. If you want to know where the person is, look at where his or her thought is. And we have control over our thoughts, and we find ourselves being pulled down to anxious, non-productive thoughts, to take a couple of breaths, to try to center ourselves a little bit, and to deliberately focus on what it is that matters to us, what it is to be grateful for. I'm grateful for this, for the ability for us to be able to get together as a community and support each other. You know, I think that's an incredible kind of gift to be able to share this kind of wisdom and the wisdom of Yadus, the wisdom of Chazal, coupled with the integration of Torah Umada. And I'll just end with something that I know I always speak about, but it's the imagery that I have, so I'll share it with you as I come to the end. And it's the study of people at the bottom of a hill. So researchers take an individual, put him or her at the bottom of a hill, and they say, estimate the steepness of this hill. If you're alone, you see the hill is very steep. If you have somebody at your side, the hill will look less steep. And then researchers find that the closer you are to the person at your side, the less steep the hill looks and the less tired you get walking up the hill. Tovim hashnayim min ha'echad. And I'm inspired by the whole community having joined together through this difficult time. And I'm confident that as we share in hope and in knowledge and in our goals, that we should all come to find the full refuah sanefesh and refuah saguf.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pelcovitz, and thank you to everyone who joined our call. Thank you to those who helped with the technical arrangements in setting up this opportunity. We are very deeply blessed to be part of an institution where so many scholars and rabbanim find their home and can provide such incredible and insightful guidance to our community in the midst of such tremendous challenge. On behalf of everyone at Yeshiva University, we want to wish the entire community a wonderful Shabbos, a Freilich Purim, that everyone should be able to maintain their well-being, that everyone should be safe, and we wish those who have been affected a refuah shlema, and we will continue to share whatever information is current through our various channels from Yeshiva University. We thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful night.